Joining us now, Fox News contributor and Sirius XM Patriot Radio host David Webb and Fox News contributor Deroy Murdock. Great to see both of you. Deroy, just 4 months ago, many of the members of the Kennedy family endorsed a non-compos mentis man in the White House for another term, and none of their self-aggrandizing public puffery, just like that, is about country.
Yeah, look, I think that's a problem, but they're upset because RFK Jr. is not endorsing a party now that JFK and RFK Sr. would not recognize. If JFK and RFK Sr. were alive today, I think they'd be appalled at the current Democrat Party, which is nothing like the party that either of them led back in the 1960s. I have a piece in the Daily Signal today where I detail some of the more outrageous views of Kamala Harris. For example, the whole notion of ripping the border open and letting 10 million illegals march right across, some of whom might be voting in this election. The idea of getting rid of private health insurance, having Medicare for all. We're all in a big government system, defunding the police, her co-sponsorship of the Green New Deal with all that massive spending and those mandates, like you have to buy an electric-powered stove, you got to buy an electric-powered car, et cetera, et cetera. I think JFK and RFK Sr. will be appalled at the current Democrat Party, and RFK Jr.'s relatives are upset because he's not in league with a party that neither his father or his uncle would recognize if they were alive today.
Yeah, Drew, I think you're right. Both RFK and JFK would be aghast at what's happened to the Democrat Party. Again, they fought Marxism. Absolutely. And their party now is embracing Marxism. But David, I have 10 brothers and sisters and 2 parents, and they didn't agree with me in politics. But not once did any of them say anything publicly against me, because our family came first, before politics. And I think it says more about Kerry Kennedy when she's going to go out and do these interviews against her brother, as opposed to keeping that within the family. Again, says volumes about her priorities and values.
Well, it's also about either dishonesty and or ignorance combined. I would recommend to Kerry Kennedy or any other member of the Kennedy family that they read JFK and the Reagan Revolution by Larry Kudlow, our friend and colleague here, because her uncle and other members of the Kennedys actually worked with Republicans on economic and on other issues like national security, rather than just shove them away from the table. Look, this is a difference between leftism where it is today, where you have to follow in lockstep no matter what it is, whether it's true or not. And it's beyond just destroying a family member. It's the fact that if you dare to think for yourself, the left doesn't allow it. If you don't follow the narrative, if you don't carry on the diatribe, you are to be destroyed. Whether you agree with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or not, and I don't on some policies, I like some of the things he says about food and about things that are really true about Fauci and other things. Great, work together, build a coalition. His statement was clear. Making America great again, bringing America back to where the middle class thrives, which is contrary to what the Democrats and the left want today as a party. They want to control people, not allow them to control their own lives. And he's just not for that. Whether you agree or disagree with him, that's one thing you can say about him.
If they can't control you, they'll destroy you. And they're trying to limit voter choices, not just with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but Cornel West. They tried to keep him off the ballot. Let's move into this.
In the name of democracy.
Yeah, defender of democracy, my ass. 36 days and counting without a Kamala Harris press conference or sit-down interviews since becoming the nominee. But, oh yes, it's Trump who the American people need to hear from.
And Donald Trump needs to talk about his actual agenda. It's scared to see that this former president is so scared to get on the debate stage. But I guess if I had his positions, I'd be scared to let the American people know what they worry as well.
Yeah, he's really scared by talking directly to the American people every day, Deroy. Kamala Harris, when she does speak, she still says nada, niente, nothing.
Yeah, that's an amazing comment I just heard. I mean, Donald J. Trump just gave a speech before the National Guard Association in Detroit today. He went to a smaller meeting at one of his campaign offices, also in Detroit. This man speaks to the public all the time. In fact, he may recall, not about 6 weeks ago, got shot in the ear and almost killed while he's out talking to people. So the idea that Donald J. Trump is keeping his agenda to himself is ridiculous. You can go right to his website and take a look at the agenda he's put forth. He has 20 promises to the American people in terms of energy independence, cutting taxes, peace through strength, closing the border. You can agree with those ideas, you can disagree with them, but the idea that Donald J. Trump is hiding his ideas and his agenda from the American people is absolutely, totally absurd.
But you know, David, this is a par for the course for Democrats. They lie about everything, whether it's freedom, democracy, the southern border is secure, or Donald Trump hasn't put out policies, but Kamala Harris has. It never ends. I mean, I can't get over the media and Democrats, how much they'll gaslight the American people.
Yeah, I mean, you got to ask yourself, what kind of pretzel logic are they using to tie themselves up like this? Look, for the American people, don't listen to Sean Dagan, Deroy, or myself. Go to KamalaHarris.com. Go to DonaldJTrump.com. Kamala Harris's website looks like a starter page for a non-existent website. No policies, nothing. Donate, join, sign up for the email list. And the American people deserve better. Matter of fact, demand better. And I'll speak to Democrats out there, if there's any of you left that are not just walking in lockstep and being told what to do by Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi and the elitists and Chuck Schumer, who wants to get rid of the filibuster if he has a chance. If you're not that Democrat, ask yourself, what can you defend based on her policies or lack of it? And the flip-flops, by the way, they're not flip-flops. She has just flipped to try and lie to you, to try and get through the election on joy and culture and happiness. Well, there's no joy, there's a loss of culture, and there's no happiness on our tax policies and on our redistributive socialist policies.
David Webb, Deroy Murdock, great to see both of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.